They have quite an array of smells. I mean, as Holly said, their feces are quite fragrant at times.
It's a nice way of putting it.
I would say your euphemism use is just top-notch, Tyler. Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. I don't know what time of year it is when you actually pressed play on this episode, but at the time of recording, summer swelter has the southeast in its humid, sweaty grip, and the 4th of July holiday is just around the corner. With so many people embarking on their summer vacations, hopefully more than a few of you with the Tennessee Aquarium on your itinerary, it seemed like an opportune time for me to bring together a panel of my expert coworkers to answer questions about many of the animals that you're most excited to see. In this special listener questions smorgasbord of an episode, you'll hear why penguins steal rocks from each other, learn what the heck stink fighting is, and how otters keep cool in the summer, among many other fascinating tidbits. So whether you're en route to the aquarium right now, just wrapped up your journey from the mountains to the seas, or are still dreaming of paying us a visit, I hope you'll enjoy this discussion of all things lemurs, otters, and penguins. Oh my. Anyway, let's get to it, shall we? On with the podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. I am Casey Phillips, your host, and today I have brought in a super panel of experts. Everyone's like shaking their head. You're all experts. Anyway, of caretakers for some of our, what I like to call our marquee animals. So the ones that people think of when they think of the Tennessee Aquarium that are often the kind of attendance drivers, the ones that people are very excited to see. Those being namely the North American river otters, the gentoo and macaroni penguins, and the ring-tailed, red-ruffed, and red-collared brown lemurs. So I have brought in 3 of the caretakers, not all of them, who are responsible for caring for those animals, and I'll go around the table, starting with Sam Grote. Grote. I always get it wrong. So Sam, tell everybody how long you've been at the aquarium and the animals you care for.
So I've been at the aquarium for about 5.5 years now, and I take care of 3 species of lemurs, like you said, the ringtails, the red ruffs, and the red collar browns, as well as some radiated tortoises.
All right, and those are found where at the aquarium?
So those are found in Lemur Forest. That is the 4th floor of the Ocean Journey building.
All right. And actually, and not logically, that's actually where you start your journey when you're actually in that building.
Yes. So you go straight up to the top and then work your way down. It's honestly a really good way of moving through an aquarium. I think it has the best flow that I've ever encountered. So not to brag.
And I guess it puts a lot of pressure on you. You have to make a good first impression. Yes.
It always is fun because we can hear the guests from our office. And so we always love hearing lemurs. It kind of brightens up the day when you hear a little kid doing that. So.
All right. And next to Sam is Holly Gibson.
Correct.
And you are, well, tell everybody who you care for.
So I care for our colony of 23 gentoo and macaroni penguins. That is the Penguins Rock exhibit, which is also in the Ocean Journey building. It's kind of in the mid-level, so after you see the lemurs and go through the butterfly exhibit, you'll make your way down to the 2nd level, and then you'll get to our penguins.
And there are usually a lot of people in there, because that's a real attendance draw.
It is very popular, yes.
All right, in process of elimination, we now know that next to Holly is Tyler and Tyler Schneider. Tyler, you are responsible for caring for the North American river otters.
Yes, so a lot of my time here at the aquarium is spent with them. I do kind of help out as needed with the lemurs and some vet stuff just because I have a background kind of towards that. But I've been at this aquarium for just about 2 years.
Awesome. And then the name of the exhibit that you are responsible for caring for the otters in is?
Chase Gatton River Otter Falls.
I forgot there's now that's right. It's been renamed recently.
Yeah.
All right. And that is, speaking of first impressions, that is, depending upon which building you start in, that is also potentially a first impression.
Yeah, I think just like the lemurs, you can definitely hear when people get to the otters if they're up and active. So it's fulfilling to hear that people like that so much.
Now, I've said this before on the show that for me and probably for quite a few people who visited the aquarium back in the day when it first opened back in 1992, that was my first impression of the aquarium and remains probably my favorite exhibit, though that is no reflection on Sam or Holly. because there were no lemurs or penguins when I was 7 years old and visited back in 1992. So anyway, well, we will carry on with this episode, and this is actually a special episode because in this case, a lot of the heavy lifting is off of my plate. I asked for questions from followers of the aquarium on our various social channels for each of you, since as anyone who's visited the aquarium and walked through those galleries will hear people asking questions either of themselves or maybe to their smartphones, or if they're lucky enough to have an educator in the gallery, they might ask the educator or one of you, I guess, if you're walking through. But we will begin with a listener question from YouTube. Ray Prater 4284 asks, and this is for you, Tyler, are river otters threatened in Tennessee? I saw them frequently when I was growing up. And he used a sea otter emoji in this one, but we'll let that slide.
So they are not. Their official conservation status is of least concern. They are spread out pretty well throughout the United States, so it really kind of depends on where you're looking, but they are pretty elusive too. So just because you're not seeing them doesn't mean they're not there. They're plentiful in this area, but they are very good at avoiding people if they want to.
So when you say elusive, do they spend time under the water, or do they hide out on land?
Yeah, they spend a lot of time in water, but when they are on land, they'll den up too. So they might dig a little burrow and go in there. But these guys are also crepuscular, so they're not spending a lot of the day out and about. They kind of spend their time out foraging at dawn and dusk. So times that we're not really usually going to be outside looking for animals.
That's a great science word for you, though, corpuscular. So throw that one out at your next cocktail party, I guess. Before we move on to other questions, I did want to ask, how much overlap is there between your areas of care? Tyler already mentioned that he kind of moonlights working with the lemurs, did you say?
Yep.
Do any of the rest of you, have you ever had experience working with the animals that other people on the panel have care of?
Yeah, I think actually all of us have probably done each other's areas several times. Yeah. We're cross-trained in each area. I do river otters every Monday, so I'm in there quite a bit. And I have, in the past, I've helped fill in for lemurs if we're shorthanded. I know Sam has filled in otters, and Tyler has come and helped us feed a couple times or help count the fish that we're feeding out. So I think we're all familiar with each other's areas for sure.
So what's the strategy behind that? Why do you need to cross-train? Is it just in case people take vacations or get sick? Or
Yeah, we all have different weekends, and of course things are going to come up. People are going to get sick. They're going to be on vacation, or we may need to do a veterinary procedure where we have to go off-site for that, so we need someone to fill in. So it's always good to have people cross-trained in different areas so we can fill in as needed.
Yes, and COVID kind of helped.
Yes, absolutely.
Make that necessary as well. We were split up into 2 different teams, and so if someone was going to be gone, you needed to know a lot more and be able to cover a lot more. So it just kind of became necessary, and not in a bad way.
Now, was it difficult to learn how to care for a different kind of animal, or do a lot of the same rules and practices apply kind of regardless of what animal you're caring for?
I would say there's a lot of overlap as far as like general care. We all pretty much know how to clean an area and do things like that, and know what to look for as far as like abnormal animal behaviors.
We did start this episode talking about how basically everyone here has started their day with poop. So
yes, we did. So yeah, for the most part, there's a lot of overlap. It's like the finer details if someone's on medication, or how to prep food, or just individuals' behaviors. But luckily, we communicate really well on if somebody's going to have to cover something like that.
So what do, and we will get back to listener questions here in a little bit, but what do each of you love most about caring for your respective animals? Or it could just be about the animal itself, if you'd rather not it be targeting specifically some aspect of their care.
For me, with the lemurs, I really enjoy how I can make every day kind of different. It could be the same day over and over again, or I can give them a brand new enrichment that I've never tried out before, or give them one that I know they really like and kind of see their interactions with that. So I like doing that kind of stuff. Probably my favorite.
Ollie?
Yeah, for me, with the penguins, it's definitely that they all have a different personality, and they all have their different quirks, and so that's a lot of fun to learn about and be with them every day. And with the penguins, they have a lot of seasonal changes, whether it's breeding season or molting season where they replace all their feathers. So their moods and their behaviors can change throughout the year too. So not only do they each have their own individual personality, it depends on the time of the year. So they definitely keep us on our toes.
Tyler?
I think my answer is pretty similar to Holly's. With the otters, just getting to know their different personalities and behaviors. I think especially it shines through with our group in training, like just the way you have to interact with each of them is totally different because they will respond better to different things than the other otters do. So just getting to know their little quirks and their personalities is an exciting thing.
That's like a recurring theme of this show, actually. The more of these episodes I've done and the more different kinds of animals we've talked about. A recent episode with our curator of forests was about focused on birding. And he talked about the fact that birds have personality, which I think some people might be a little surprised by. And another episode about rays that happened a couple weeks ago, same thing. There are specific rays that have different personalities and would like to be touched more than others. So I think that's probably surprising to some people. It's certainly surprising to me, and I've worked here for 8 years.
Definitely makes you think about animals in a little bit of a different, like that they would have their own personalities. They're not just, a mindless thing that we look at and kind of enjoy, but we can get to know their personalities as far as we understand what a personality is like, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, and I guess that's something that like kind of deepens your own relationship with them, and you have a different kind of interaction with them, obviously, than people who are just coming through the door. So you've got a more multifaceted maybe relationship with them than just guests do, which is why you're talking to us today. All right, moving on to other questions that came in. On Instagram, Tessa CVB says, how do you make sure that the group of male otters and one female otter get along?
Patience, for sure. They do have a pretty long breeding season. It's like October to March, really, when their behaviors are kind of focused on breeding. So I think that complicates things too. We are lucky that our oldest 3 males get along really well.
What are their names?
Hunter, Digger, and Louie. Mm-hmm. And they will be fine with each other throughout the year. They'll have little spats and stuff, but nothing that really necessitates them being apart. Maya and Benny, our other 2 males, are also brothers, so they do really well throughout the year. And we're kind of finding that those 2, just with their activity level and personality, are doing really well with Sunshine outside of breeding purposes too. So,
and Sunshine would be our
female, yes, our young female,
the newest addition to our romp of river otters. In fact, I think you start at more or less the same time that she came in.
I think I started like 3 months before she got here, so we've been on a journey together.
Where did she come from?
Little Rock Zoo in Arkansas.
I knew for some reason I kept thinking Ozarks, and that makes a lot of sense now. Okay. And what is she like? Because she, in my experience working with her, she just seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, she has a lot of energy for sure. I think she wants more interaction for sure, whether that's from us or the other otters or enrichment. She is just not as happy with sleeping as the boys are. I think she wants to get out and do things and be active a lot throughout the day. So she has a lot of energy. You're correct in assuming that for sure. But she's great to work with. I mean, she does what we need her to do. She shifts, she trains well. She's a pretty good otter. So
she seems like a good one for engaging with guests too.
Oh yeah. I mean, she'll run along the glass with us in the morning if we're out there doing stuff. She's a very personable otter for sure.
Since I'm guessing group dynamics is something that kind of plays a role with your animals, Holly with the penguins, and then Sam obviously with the lemurs. So do you have anything to add about how you deal with personality clashes with your respective animals?
So as far as lemurs, they are social animals. So the best practice is to kind of let them work out any spats that they might have, because it can actually be more detrimental to split them apart. If you were to split them apart for even a day, there's a chance you may never be able to put them back together.
Really?
That's not necessarily always the case, but there is always that chance. So we always, try as much as we can to let them kind of work it out themselves, give added enrichment as distractions to kind of get them interested in working with that and less focused on each other. But spats do happen, especially at breeding season. So we do have 2 different groups of ringtails for the fact that they cannot mix with each other. So we've had to kind of work around that as well.
Now, do the personality clashes happen because of incidents, or is it just that like they just, some people you just don't, you naturally do not get along with people, even though you've never had like a bad interaction with them, you just don't necessarily gel with them?
So it's usually a dominance thing. We see it the most during breeding season when all the males are really amped up, and they do have a hierarchy. So we have, our lemurs at the top are going to try and maintain that, and usually it's our middle of the group ones that start a lot more drama because they're trying to like figure out if they're going to go for a little bit higher or if they're going to get pushed down farther. So that's usually where the drama comes from.
Holly, what about with the penguins?
Yeah, so our penguins too are definitely have group dynamics. They're not necessarily, they don't form a hierarchy like the lemurs do. And we do see an increase in aggression during breeding season, kind of like the lemurs. But again, we just try to let them work it out on exhibit because they are colonial. They are group animals. They do like to stick together. The most common injury that we may see during nesting season, because they're all vying for different nesting sites, and so they do tend to bicker a little bit during nesting season. The most common injury we may see is a beak injury, like a scratch or something like that. So if we see that they're getting a little bit too aggressive with each other, we can try to separate them for a day or 2 until it calms down, and then bring them back onto the exhibit and monitor them and make sure everything is going well.
My timeout chair when I was growing up definitely did not have a pool, so I feel like the penguins have it better than I did.
Yeah, we like to joke that they actually get spoiled in those backup rooms because they don't have to deal with the drama for a day or 2.
So to move things back in your direction, Sam, on Facebook, Kelly Newell wrote, she just wrote stink fighting. And that was about as much of an on-ramp as I think we need to discuss that. So walk people through what stink fighting is and why it happens.
So stink fighting is something that our ringtail lemurs do, and you may have seen it when you've visited. And what they do is they will actually rub the scent glands that they have on their wrists up against the scent glands that they have on their chests to kind of make a little bit of a combination between those two. And then they rub their tail through those scent glands as well, make their tail super stinky. And then they'll go up to another male typically, and just kind of wave their tails back and forth at each other, squealing with their ears pinned back and staring aggressively at each other. And then one of them will eventually kind of bow out and jump away. And that is stink fighting. It's typically no contact, but it sounds very dramatic and typically happens the most during that breeding season is where we're going to see a lot more of that. That's not to say they don't do it just periodically throughout the year as well. So,
and it's something that's not exhibited by any other lemur species?
To my knowledge, it is strictly a ringtail lemur behavior.
That is fascinating. I'd never heard of stink fighting prior to starting to work here. And it's funny because their noses must be more sensitive than ours because I can't smell anything particularly bad about it.
No, it is not. It's not very stinky. Lemurs do have a smell, and it would definitely be associated with the scent glands that they have, but it's nothing that's like super obvious. But they do have a wet nose like a cat or a dog does, so their sense of smell is very important to them, and it is very highly developed. So one of the things that we'll actually do for them for enrichment is different scents for them to investigate and kind of scent mark as well.
Holly, I didn't share this question with you because it didn't occur to me until just now, but can penguins smell?
That's a good question. We get that question a lot, and I don't think we really know the extent to which they can smell or if they can smell very well. I mean, they spend a lot of their time underwater, so they don't need to smell anything underwater, but they do have nostrils or nares on the top of portion of their beak. So they probably have some type of sense of smell. I just don't know if we know how strong it is exactly. I think they have a little bit of a sense of taste, but they're more concerned with texture versus taste.
Okay. So when you say they're more concerned with texture, how does that play out?
Just their preference in the types of food that they like or the fish that they'll eat. I can hand a penguin 2 fish that to me look identical, and they will reject one over and over and over and then eat the other one. So it just depends on their personal preference and how picky they're being that day. And one fish may feel right to them and the other may feel wrong.
Well, like you said, they've got very strong personalities.
They do.
Well, and they are very stinky. The reason I ask is because when you go in the back of people all the time, and I think people think of this as some sort of flex on my part, and maybe the same for you. But whenever I say like I was in with the penguins, they immediately like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, no, I got bit like 4 times, and they pooped on my shoe, and it smelled terrible, and I couldn't even hear half the time because they were screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, poor Casey, he does get bit a lot, unfortunately, because he has to bend down and get good photos and videos of penguins. But they do have a smell. Like I said, there are 23 birds in our colony, and they do poop every few minutes or so. So we do a lot of cleanup throughout the day. There is definitely a certain smell to it. I have become nose blind to it. I think a lot of people that work in penguins have become nose blind to it. I know that maybe Sam and Tyler sitting on either side of me can probably smell me right now, but
it sticks to you. It's a very weird smell.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that stays on you.
I will say though, since I also do work with the otters one day a week, I always tell people I would rather smell penguin poop than otter poop. And
I would too.
I'll throw this over to Tyler and he can maybe comment on that more, because we were talking about the stink fighting. Otters can also musk, and their musk is very strong as well.
Yeah, they have quite an array of smells. I mean, as Holly said, their feces are quite fragrant at times.
It's a nice way of putting it.
I would say your euphemism use is just top notch.
Similar to, I mean, Holly's thing about the penguin's sense of smell, it's hard to say with otters because they are in the water a lot. I would say, having watched them try to hunt, it's not great. But I think they're closer to lemurs in that aspect, where they do use scent as a communication. If they're agitated or fighting, they do musk, which is just kind of expressing a very smelly substance, and that it's quite fragrant. So they do definitely use a sense of smell for kind of communicating in that aspect, but hard to quantify that for sure.
Like if you've ever had a cat that's really upset, they've done a similar kind of thing.
I mean, I have 3 kids. I'm used to smells too. I feel like I've become more or less nose blind over the past 8 years too. So I'm not going to try and pronounce this name, but this came in from Instagram, and the question was just, can I pet the otter? I don't know which otter they were asking to pet.
But for sure, no, you can't. None of them like tactile engagement. And on top of that, we're not going and trying to pet them. We never share a space with them. But we will do like training behaviors that would help us with their medical care. So things like going into a smaller space and being decensed to touch for like vaccinations or stuff like that. And they do not like that. They definitely aren't gaining anything from that. They don't want that in their life. But even if they were to, they're wild animals. They have sharp teeth and sharp nails. I would for sure not advise it. They're not as cuddly and friendly as they might look on the surface. So yeah, don't go trying to pet otters for sure. They're not one that's going to like that.
And that is why we do have otter plushies in our gift shops if you ever have that urge.
That urge, yeah.
What a nice plug, Susan. The marketing department appreciates the handout.
Missed my calling.
All right. So I guess the natural follow-up to that is then, can people pet the penguins or the lemurs?
So penguins are a little bit different. We do try to do a little bit of tactile training, and that's, if you don't know what tactile training is just getting our animals used to our touch. We don't do that with otters because they could probably cause a lot more damage to us if they did bite us. Now, don't get me wrong, penguins can bite. They do bite. They can slap you.
They can.
And
it
does hurt. But when we have to do physicals on our penguins, we have to get up close and personal to them. So we want them to be comfortable with us. Our penguins wear bands for identification, and sometimes we do have to change those bands. So we want them to be comfortable with us. If we can do tactile training with some of our penguins, we do. Now, it is all based on personality. Some of our penguins do not like us in their presence or in their little personal bubble, so we respect that. So we don't do tactile training with all of our penguins, but some of them who are receptive to it, we can. And that does include kind of touching them on the back or touching them on the flipper or touching them on the feet, just so they're used to it. But that's really just keeper only. We don't have any type of program where you can come in and pay to pet our penguins. We want to keep it for medical purposes only.
Sam?
So kind of the same as everybody else, it is not advised to touch a lemur. Unfortunately, that is one of the big threats with lemurs is people wanting them as pets. So that's been really detrimental. Everyone thinks that they're cute and cuddly, but they do have some pretty sharp canine teeth, and they do also have some sharper nails as well. So they can cause a lot of issues. And just like with the other two, we do work on tactile voluntarily with them for medical purposes or for just their physical and mental well-being. So if you followed our pages at all, you know that we did lose our female red-collared brown lemur. And so with John, her mate, we needed to do some grooming sessions. And so we got him used to allowing us to comb him out like he would another lemur. If Jesse were still there, he would have someone grooming him, and that was for his mental well-being as well as the health of his coat. Since then,
one of my favorite
yes.
animal care stories of the last couple of years
yes.
here at the aquarium.
It was a lot of trial and error with that, and we had a huge success. His coat looks amazing, and since then he's been being groomed by the other two lemurs. And then we also have our red ruff lemur who gets voluntary birth control injections, which our other keeper, Maggie, has been working very hard with our vet staff to do. And then she also gets cold laser therapy. So getting that tactile touch and getting them used to that is really helpful, but that's usually the only reason we do that.
And speaking of Maggie, there is a previous episode of the Podcast Aquatic that goes into a lot more detail about why you would not want to have a lemur as a pet, including some of the things that you just mentioned, Sam.
Yes.
So do go back in the archives and listen to that. And then while you're there, please write a review and leave a rating and all the things that help us out with the algorithm. So this is a question, Holly, for you, and it's from my son, who is, I told you before the show started, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time to think about it, but he is working on a penguin project at school right now. He is in third grade, and they're studying penguins. So he wants to know, what is the species of penguin that can dive the deepest and hold its breath the longest?
Okay. Well, first of all, what's his name?
Henry.
Henry. Hey, Henry. Shout out. I'm glad you're doing your project on penguins. I love that. So you will want to tell your class that it is the emperor penguin. So there's about 18 different types or species of penguins, and the emperor penguins are the largest, and they are found way down in Antarctica. They're one of the very cold weather species of penguins, and they can dive the deepest and the longest out of all the different species. They can dive up to 500 meters, which would be about 1,500 feet, and they can stay underwater for about 18 to 20 minutes. And the longest dive that was ever recorded for an emperor penguin was almost a half an hour. It was 28 minutes. So they have this amazing ability to slow their heart rate down, and they have this advanced oxygen storage in their body that allows them to do this. But it's really amazing to think about how deep down they can go and how long they can stay underwater like that.
Awesome. Well, there you go, Henry. I hope that's helpful. Tyler, how long can otters be underwater?
It depends on how active they're being, kind of around the 8 to 10 minute mark. So definitely not as long as emperor penguins, but a pretty substantial amount of time.
That's pretty long.
Yeah.
Sam, how long can ring-tailed lemurs hold their breath underwater?
About 2 seconds.
You probably would not like it.
Yeah, a
big
very
fans of
frantic 2 seconds.
yes.
All right, so we have another two-word question from Facebook from Cindy Sabrissa. I'm probably going to mispronounce the name, so I'll just go ahead and prematurely apologize. Cindy wrote rock theft. So I should preface this by saying the request for comments suggested some topics that people might want to know more about, including rock theft, and you can elaborate on what I'm probably referring to there, Holly, but what exactly is rock theft and why are penguins doing it?
Yeah, so I like this question a lot. If you ever come to visit us during our nesting season, which is usually starts the first week of April, the types of penguins that we have, again, we have Gentoo penguins and macaroni penguins. They build their nests out of rocks. Not all penguin species do this, but where these species are found on the islands around Antarctica, that's pretty much all they have available to build their nest with. So they build their nests with rocks, and if you do come visit us during our nesting season, you are all but guaranteed to see penguins stealing rocks from each other to build their nest. It's a lot of fun. I like watching people when I'm on exhibit and I see it happening. I can see people in the audience watching it and pointing and laughing. And but it's a very natural behavior, both for penguins in human care and out in their natural habitat. Nest building is a big deal for penguins, and they're always trying to build the largest and the sturdiest nest as possible. So the more efficient that they can be at this, the better. So it's a lot easier, quicker, safer, and they can save a little energy by just going over one of their neighbors' nests and taking their rocks instead of going to venture further out to try to find a rock where, the further and longer away you are from your nest, the bigger the chance there is that a predator could maybe swoop in and steal your egg, or something may happen to your chick. So they also want to make it quick and efficient to steal those rocks from each other. And we see this all the time during nesting season. Our best nest builder is a male Gentoo. His name is Nipper. And if you are visiting us, he has bright green bands on his flippers. But if his mate, who is currently Pebbles, if she's laying down on the nest, he's constantly going to work all day long, going to rock piles, going to other penguins' nests, stealing those rocks and bringing them back. And he kind of builds a little barrier around Pebbles because he's working so hard to build that nest up. But yeah, you will definitely see rock theft all the time, both here and if you ever get the opportunity to see penguins out in their natural environment near Antarctica, you'll probably see it there too.
Great answer. All right, Tyler, for you, off of Instagram, Coyote at Dusk wants to know, what is the best time of day to see the otters? You already mentioned that they're corpuscular, to get that word back into the conversation, but if you're visiting the aquarium.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to kind of get that message out to guests a lot more too. So being crepuscular, otters are mainly active at dawn and dusk and spend time around those times of day kind of out and about. They also do spend an average of 10 to 12 hours a day sleeping or resting. So that chunk of time, that 10 to 12 hours, is usually in the middle of the day or when the aquarium's open. So what that means for your visit to the aquarium is we typically do 3 shifts a day to kind of get everybody outside during the day, around opening, around 11:30 to 12, and kind of around 3 to 3:30. They're usually active right after that because we'll put new food or enrichment out. So they kind of spend about 15 to 20 minutes after that time period up and about, searching, foraging, looking for whatever might be new out there. But definitely dawn and dusk that's their time to shine. So,
all right. And if for some reason you wake up around dawn or are just surfing the internet around dusk and want to see the otters, you can always tune into our live webcam, which is on our website, which is tnaqua.org. The same is true for the penguins. If you want to check in on them pretty much any time of day, they are on 24/7. You can go again to the website, tenaqua.org, and look for our webcam section. And we used to have one for the lemur forest exhibit, and I think that one is either down or has been taken down. I'm not entirely sure. The angle was a little bit weird on that one.
Yeah, I think it's been taken down at this point.
But you can always check in on the penguins and the otters. So those aren't going anywhere as far as I know. So if you're curious about what they're doing when they are actually most naturally active, that would be a good time to do it. And then, as Holly has mentioned, nesting season is a great time to watch the webcam because they're so active and they're just moving all over the exhibit, and it's fun even for those of us who work here. I'm in the IMAX building, which is across the street from the aquarium, but every once in a while I'll tune in just to see during those weeks of hectic activity exactly what's happening. And then when a chick arrives, you can check in, and if you're lucky, you might see a little chick face pop out.
Very good plug.
That's why I'm in the marketing department. Yeah. All right. So also from Instagram, the lizard wants to know, and this could be for any or all of you, are any of the lemurs, penguins, or otters wildlife rescues, or were they all born in human care or hatched in human care?
Well, all of our lemurs and our tortoises, to my knowledge, have been born in human care. So it's very rare that a lemur were to come from Madagascar. Unfortunately, there are usually surrenders from people who thought that they would make a great pet. And so those typically end up being confiscated for whatever reason, but we do not have any of those in our care currently.
Yeah, same for penguins. Currently, all penguins in zoos and aquariums that you go to are going to be hatched in human care. And that's been going on since about the 1960s. In 1959, with the Antarctic Treaty, it was made illegal to hunt for penguins or to collect eggs from any species out in their natural environment. So it's no longer legal to collect eggs. So any penguin that you see is going to be hatched and raised in human care.
Otters, I think, can be a little bit of a different story. They are obviously native to a large portion of the U.S., so the occurrences of confiscations or orphaned animals or injured animals that need help is a lot greater. Those can get dispersed to any zoo that it kind of pops up around. Here at the Tennessee Aquarium, we do have all of our males, all 5 of them actually are from the wild at one point in their life. Hunter, Digger, and Louie were rescued from the fur trade in Louisiana about 10 years ago, I think. And then Maya and Benny, our 2 brothers, were orphans in the North Carolina area, kind of around the same time. So Sunshine is our only otter here that was born in human care in Little Rock, Arkansas. So we kind of have a little bit of both going on there. Which
is funny because you mentioned the difference in personalities, and for being the otter that was born in human care and raised in human care, she seems the most personable in terms of interacting with guests. And do you think that plays a role at all in why she is the way that she is?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think she's helped Maya, Benny to come out of their shell a little more. So they are getting kind of more active. They're already pretty active to begin with, but it's hard to say if that has something to do with her being born in professional care. I will say I think she would be the most likely to survive in the wild. She's the best hunter for sure. But I think a large portion of that is just her age too. She's a lot younger than our boys. Female otters are a little more robust and active than males in the wild too. So I think she's got a few factors that make her such a personable little superstar there.
I mean, they almost sound like lions in that respect.
Yeah. Yeah. She is a lot more outgoing than our males. So
So off of Facebook, Michael Cross wants to Michael, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. You and I have actually met, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Anyway, Michael wants to know, I've noticed that the penguin exhibit seems like it has a lot smaller square footage per animal than the other habitats. Is there something unique about penguins not needing much space, or maybe it just looks smaller from the outside than it is, on the inside?
Yeah, as we kind of touched on earlier, they are colonial animals. They do live in very large groups out in the wild. Our exhibit, when it was built to house 30 individuals. Right now, we only have 23. I think the most we've ever had at one time is 28 birds. But you got to remember, with these animals, it's safety in numbers, and they like to group up very close to one another. And you can see that if you ever look at the nests that they build out in the wild. They basically build these nests on top of each other. So they like to stay very close to one another. They are colonial. They like to stay in groups. So they're actually pretty spread out if you compare that to how they group together out in the wild. You may have a colony of tens and tens of thousands of birds that live in Antarctica, and you can see they stay really close together because, again, they do have safety in numbers, and they feel safer as a tight-knit group like that.
Well, and another, if you want to hear direct observations about, attesting to that, and what previous episode of the podcast talking about opportunities that members of our staff have had to travel abroad, included my boss, our vice president and chief communications and marketing officer, talking about his trip down to the Antarctic Peninsula and seeing, I think it was gentoos, and how they behave in the wild, and doing exactly what you said, Holly, where they were literally nesting on top of each other. So he said he felt very vindicated by seeing that we were basically replicating the conditions they would have in the wild.
Yeah, and they've actually done studies on how successful the penguins are at hatching and raising chicks, depending on where their nest location is. And the nests that are located in the center of the large colony are usually more successful than the nests that are located along the perimeter of that colony. And if you think about it, that makes sense. The ones that are located in the center, they have all that protection around them. The ones that are located along the perimeter of the colony, they're going to be more susceptible to predators or the elements. So again, they find safety in groups, so they want to stick together.
I mean, anybody who's seen March of the Penguins
has
seen that in action. They cluster up and stick together for warmth and protection. So, all right, let's get one for you, Sam. So, off of Instagram, Lexi Young 2002 asks, "What is the lemur's favorite enrichment activity?"
So for the lemurs, we kind of talked about it earlier. They've got a really good sense of smell, and so that's going to be really important for them. And one of their favorite things to do is scent marking. So just like they do with the stink fights, they rub their scent glands all over new objects to make them smell like themselves, kind of claim it as their part of their home territory. They can get really into it and then eventually start stink fighting because of it, but that is their absolute favorite thing, is the scent marking.
Holly, Tyler, you guys want to sound off on your respective animals' favorite enrichment activity?
Yeah, so our penguins have a couple different ones that I can think of, but if I had to pick one that is most interactive with the whole group, it's probably ice cubes. And we just got done talking about nesting behaviors. So our nesting season is usually only a few months out of the year. It usually starts in April, and it can go throughout the summer, and that's when they have their rocks. If we're not in nesting season, we'll remove their rocks, but we do give them ice cubes usually once a week, since it is such a popular enrichment item, and we basically will fill up 10 to 12 buckets of ice cubes from an ice machine we have, and we dump them in the exhibit just in piles, and they act like those ice cubes are their nesting rocks. So they'll pick them up and they'll move them all around the exhibit, and they'll build a little nest with those ice cubes. So it's a lot of fun to see. My other favorite enrichment, which I just want to plug, is the sprinkler, because they love to play in sprinklers, and it can also it allows them to do their natural bathing behavior. You can see a lot of them kind of bathing in the sprinkler. But last week, our youngest penguin is Lida Sue. She's about 7 months old. I saw her standing under the sprinkler and trying to bite at the water as it was falling down on her, and it was just so cute. So I try to do sprinklers once a week too. because they really like that one.
Tyler?
We definitely cannot go wrong with anything related to water for the otters. So like even a trash can or a big barrel or like a little rubber bowl with water, that's their favorite thing in the world. So on, I guess, the more complicated side than just giving them some water bowls, they like to groom a lot. They have a really dense coat, so that requires a lot of upkeep on their side. So things like hammocks made out of fire hose or car wash material, fleece or towels, stuff like that. They really like to nest and groom with a variety of things. So,
well, since you mentioned their fur, my wife actually had a question. Again, I had to really just go to every resource I could think of to get questions for this, and which is just so strange to me. But my wife wanted to know, she said, I know otters have dense fur and penguins have dense feathers to keep them warm in hot and cold water. Oh, actually, this is for you, Sam. I messed up.
Oh.
But why do lemurs look like they have such dense fur when they live in a hot environment?
So they actually live in several different environments depending on the species. Our red ruff lemurs have probably the thickest coat of all of ours, and they actually use that to be able to keep warm because, believe it or not, the rainforest can actually be pretty cool when you're up in the treetops. It's kind of rainy. When it gets dark, it cools down. So they're going to actually use that for some insulation and some warmth to protect them from the rain. And it's also really good for our ringtails to have a thicker coat too, because they do, when they get kind of antsy during our breeding season, there is a lot of hair pulling and things like that. So it is a little bit of protection for them. The thicker the coat, the less likely they are to get some sort of a cut or anything like that. So a little bit of protection as well.
All right. And Tyler, to actually throw things back to you for just a second, the fact that I've wondered this actually, but because otters have such dense fur, and do you happen to know the like per square inch off the top of your head?
Not. Off the top of my head, I do not.
It's a lot, and I know that their fur is so dense that it traps air, which is one of the ways they kind of insulate in cold water. But what's weird to me is, so you mentioned earlier that their range is so vast. It goes all the way down from like Louisiana, right?
Yeah.
Up into Canada.
Yeah.
So how do the Canadian otters, I guess it makes sense that they would have thick fur, but how do the ones in Louisiana deal with the hot temperatures with such thick fur?
Yeah. So I think you'll see a lot of geographic differences in the wild. It's kind of colloquially known that like more southern otters are a little smaller. I guess that has something to do with less to cool down. The air in their coat, which you can see if they're up and swimming at the aquarium, you'll see little bubble trails behind them and
one
everything.
Of my favorite things.
Yeah. Is because they have such a dense coat to keep them insulated. So fun fact, that water in their exhibit is kept at 62 degrees. That's way too chilly for me. So cool. That helps keep them insulated in there. The other thing that we definitely see a lot of that I'm sure wild otters are going through is they will completely just blow their coats out around like springtime. So they will get rid of all of that extra dense fur from the winter that they used to keep themselves warm and just mass shed it to kind of help with that. So they're not carrying around as much fur in the summer months. They throw a lot of that fur out. So
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's what you see with, I guess, dogs kind of do the same thing. So just common sense would have saved you from having to answer that if I just thought about it.
It's weird to think about that other animals do that too, but they shed more than anything else I have ever worked with. So.
Since we mentioned the change in the seasons, I did want to touch for a little bit, and this kind of goes back to you, I guess, Holly, about the importance of seasonality. How do you mentioned that they have various things that happen throughout the year, the molting and the breeding season. How do we signal, I guess, to the penguins that now is the time? How do we reflect that changing of the seasons when they're not exposed to sunlight?
Yeah, so our penguins are very dependent on lighting changes. It's called their photoperiod. A question that we get a lot is, does the temperature in the exhibit change throughout the year? And actually, it doesn't. We don't change the temperature. We keep it around 40 to 45 degrees for the entire year, but their lighting is constantly changing. So all the lighting in the exhibit, they're on timers, and it basically tries to mimic the sunrise and sunset that you would see outside. So in the spring and summer months, we get longer days. In the fall and winter, we get shorter days. And that just kind of instinctually, they know that when the days are starting to get longer in the spring, that just cues them into, oh, it's breeding season. And then as summer goes on and then the days start to get shorter, that cues them in that it's time for them to start molting. So we really do have to pay attention that that lighting cycle is correct and that it's working as it should, because that's how they get all their instinctual cues of what time of year it is. And we can definitely tell a change in their behavior when we're getting close to breeding season. Even if we haven't brought in their rocks yet, their appetite goes up, their behavior changes. You can see they're a little bit more protective of their nesting sites. So even though we are officially not in breeding season yet, there are definitely cues that we can look for that they know it's coming, and it's almost time. It's their favorite time of year.
We will go ahead and wrap this up with a series of 3, I don't want to call them lightning round questions because we're not in any kind of hurry, but I did reach out to a friend of the podcast, the host of another podcast, actually, that I would like to tout. Madeline Walden is the co-host of Aquarium of the Pacific's awesome Aquarium of the Podcific show, which I love. And we talk back and forth, and I reached out and asked Madeline if she had any questions to help me kind of flesh out this episode, which we ultimately ended up getting quite a few questions. So with, again, a lot of cajoling, but I did want to make sure that Madeline's questions were asked. So she has one for each of you, starting with Holly. How do the penguins get their names?
Oh, that's a good question. Throughout the years, they've got their names in different ways, actually. So when we first opened this exhibit and we got our original group of penguins, a lot of the donors who helped make our exhibit happen got to name some of the birds. Then after that, we kind of moved on to naming contests. So we would come up with a group of 4 or 5 names, and we would put those on our social media, and people could vote on them, and then the winner was chosen based on that. And then more recently, especially during COVID, when we were shut down for a couple months, in order to bring in some funds, we did auctions. So now we've been auctioning off the names to some of our penguins. And as I mentioned, Lida Sue is our newest penguin. She's 7 months old. She's a female macaroni penguin. She's adorable, and she was one of our auction winners. So her name was a personal connection to the person who won the auction.
Awesome. Short and to the point. Tyler, Madeline's question for you is, what is the main difference between sea otters and river otters?
Sea otters are a lot bigger, first off. Sea otters are also what everyone that comes to the aquarium thinks that we have, and we do not. So they're always talking about like, oh, they'll hold hands when they're like floating on their backs. River otters do not do that. That's a very sea otter thing. So obviously the main difference is in their name. Sea otters are in the sea, a lot more northern. River otters stick to rivers and are way more spread out than sea otters. So appearance wise, river otters have more defined toes and paws. Sea otters just have kind of weird little flappy feet. So because they're spending the majority of their time in the water. So I think that's kind of another difference is river otters are getting in and out of the water a lot, wandering around on land and stuff like that. Sea otters are almost entirely in the water. So
yeah, we found out like not too long ago, like the last 10 years or so ago, that there was new evidence or new studies that found that otters were more terrestrial than I think people thought previously.
Yeah, they spend a decent amount of time on land. I don't know if a lot of that is sleeping, because they do sleep on land, and they spend a lot of their day sleeping, but they definitely get out of the water and venture around. So
yeah, the whole exhibit was like completely overhauled. It was more focused on the aquatic side of it, because the thought was that otters spent most of their time in the water, and now if you come to the exhibit, it's kind of a good balance between on land and in the water. So Anyway, so Sam, we'll wrap up with Madeline's question for you, which is, what are the lemurs' favorite snacks?
Ooh, so our lemurs really like sweet things. So any sort of fruit that we can give them is probably their absolute favorite snack. And they don't get it a lot because the fruit we have available in the US is actually a lot higher in sugar than what they would normally find in Madagascar. So it's like candy to them. So they get it for special occasions, usually training, or we'll put it in enrichment and they have to forage around for it. Since they are primates, that's a very important thing for them to do. So fruit is their favorite.
And as Maggie pointed out in the previously mentioned podcast about lemurs as pets, the lemurs you have to worry about diabetes with them.
Yes, that is a very big, problem with them. They are very prone to it. So we are always kind of keeping track of how much we're giving them. We look at their diets and we make sure that they're nice and healthy and we have a good balance of everything. So they used to have fruit in their diet every day, and we decided that we didn't feel that was necessary. So we had pulled it back for just those special training sessions and things like that. And they are healthy, and they aren't negatively affected by it. And we don't have to worry about the diabetes now. So
awesome. All right. Well, with that final question answered, we can go ahead and wrap up today's special listener mailbag episode of the Podcast Aquatic. And I'll go ahead and say thank you very much to Sam, to Holly, and to Tyler for taking time out of your very busy schedules caring for our lemurs, our penguins, and our otters to come in and answer our listeners' questions about all of those kinds of animals. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us and taking the time to do this.
It's fun.
Yeah.
All right. And if you have a question for an expert like Sam, like Holly, or like Tyler, or an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, send it to me at podcast@tnaqua.org. And in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.